Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould.
And I'm Missy.
And we are following Willow. This is our meta, mythic, fairy tale deep dive into the show Willow. We are both huge Willow fans, and we will, of course, fangirl along the way. Please make sure to like and subscribe on your podcast app of choice or on YouTube to keep up with the show. Show your support by commenting on wherever you found the show or on Twitter. It helps generate all of this fun buzz around the show. And of course, submit your comments or questions to me and Missy in the link in the liner notes for our form for the next episode. And with that, let's dig into our audience comments and questions. We have selected 3 beautiful comments/questions to talk over. Missy, did you want to read the first one?
Sure. So this comes from Yes, this comes from Angel. This is, I really like the point about Eric and Alora having an immature love connected with the perpetual symbolic childhood that Sorsha has kept them in. And I wonder if something similar is going on with Kit and Jade in terms of their current love, bearing the marks of that arrested growth and needing them to perhaps part for a time and come back together, and what myths and fairy tales might provide a template for how they'd handle that. I love this question. I really do.
It's really great.
Love it so much. It's an important question. And I just want to say, kind of as a framing for the response, I really wish we had more of Kit and Jade's story so far. I think it's moving at a slower pace than I would prefer. It makes it difficult to kind of tell where they're going to take it. Or maybe I just really want more angst for them. But yeah, I think that without knowing precisely where they're going with it and exactly what myths or fairy tales they might lean into, my instinct says, yes, they'll need to be separated, if not physically, then at least emotionally for a period of time. And specifically, I think we're talking mostly growth for Kit, Jade to some extent, but definitely for Kit a lot. I think that we've seen that Kit is very, very selfish, and she's always going to put other concerns kind of ahead of Jade. And so I think that at some point she's going to have to face the very real possibility of losing Jade in order to, learn how important she is to her and hopefully then get her back. So it is on some level kind of a lost bride story for Kit, or at least that's how I view it.
Yeah. I think it'll be physical just because that's the best way to make the metaphorical literal. And Willow as a franchise has leaned into that. We actually got a lot of that even in this episode. And yeah, Jade's issue is that she doesn't feel worthy of much, right? Like she's lacking in confidence. And in fact, this was actually quite a bit of growth in this particular episode where she was able to actually admit her failings as a friend, that I've been lying to you this whole time, but is the anger enough? Is the separation enough? I don't know if it's enough angst to actually have shown the truth of their relationship to each other. So they do need to have some sort of love trial, as it were.
Yes, definitely. And the one thing that really kind of gives me hope for this is that shot from the trailer where you see Jade has fallen into the water and Kit is swimming down, reaching for her, trying to get her out. And I am guessing from context clues in this scene that this is going to come fairly late in the season. I think that it's going to become a question of Kit can, she can either pursue something else that's important to her, whether it's trying to rescue Eric, or whether it's trying to get the cuirass, or whether it's trying to, defeat the crone, or whatever it is that she's attempting to do. Or she can save Jade, and she will need to make the decision to save Jade because Jade is what's most important to her.
And we've already had that sort of play out in a hypothetical scenario this episode where she confronts Jade to say, like, why didn't you kill him? I would have been fine. And Jade kind of says, you're more important. I didn't train you as well as I probably should have, but you're still more important than killing this, possessed former mentor of myself. Yeah.
Because Jade is more mature than Kit. So even though Jade has her own stuff she still needs to work out, she is more mature. And Kit is more of a main character than Jade is, because she is Eric's sister and Mad Mardigan is Sorsha's daughter and everything. Yeah, so I still think this is really going to focus on Kit and her hangups, and it'll be interesting to see. But I really think we're going to catch more Lost Bride. And what that means is that she's going to break some kind of taboo. And typically the broken taboo in the case of a Lost Bride is mistreatment of her. So I think that, Kit's anger and insecurity and jealousy and all her other issues at some point might boil over, and she will be cruel to Jade. And that will, cause the loss of the fairy bride, and she will have to get her back.
All right, our next one is from Marianne Maid. If we are doing a false husband storyline with Eric, will we also have him go dark at some point, which means we'll assume he'll have a redemption if Lucasfilm stays true to form? How do you predict that this will look in a dark versus divine union scenario? Okay. This is all just speculation at this point, because I don't know that we know, because we won't see Eric for, I don't know, maybe a little bit of time, maybe next episode, maybe the episode after. I'm not sure when we will actually see him. It comes down to the line Sorsha saying that Bavmorda's blood still lives in Sorsha, still lives in Kit, and still lives in Eric. Does that mean that Kit will turn and be possessed, or Eric will? Eric has more time in the dark place, right? Which may have him be possessed, turn to the dark side, something like that. Or be completely possessed by the ancient one that lives beneath. That's a scenario that I could see happening as well. And how it would play out is instead of banishment, it would turn into possession of Allura because of previous psychological ownership over her. That's how I could see it play out.
I don't know. I'm really curious. I think it's funny because as much as I love theorizing, I really feel like, they're keeping a lot of things close to the vest here, and we just haven't learned enough to really determine what direction that will take yet. But I think it's really cool. But
I think both
different
of you and I
paths
are
they
in
can
agreement
take
that
with it.
It's probably a false husband scenario, that Eric isn't. Yeah.
I think it's definitely a false husband's. Yeah, it's definitely a false husband scenario, because as we discussed last time, they really, they went out of their way to make their relationship awkward and uncomfortable, and not in like an endearing way, but in a something is very wrong here kind of way. So I think that's fairly obvious. Not to mention the fact that he hasn't been around now for 2 episodes, and so that's not something you do when you're trying to create an endgame romance.
Instead, we have Graydon yelling, "Allura!"
Yeah. Multiple times in one episode. Exactly. I know. We'll get to that.
And the last one is actually from YouTube. Sadeep16. The concept about Allura and the evil witch. Again, I can't spell her name. It was Bavmorda. From the film is a neat one. But makes sense within the fairy tale and folklore nature. I wonder if Kit's dislike or jealousy and her blood tie to her grandmother, if Kit will be taken over by her grandmother's spirit, and if the actress can't return, or maybe Eric was taken for that purpose as being a vessel of the power of the crone because of the blood of the old witch. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, because they have, I know I keep saying that, but I'm sort of open to the story they want to tell me, I guess. But they have made a real point of the bloodline already. So normally I'd say, I don't know if they're going to make that a thing, but they did. They made that a big point in the very first episode, like, you're sort of tainted by Bavmorda's blood or whatever.
It's a Chekhov's gun if they don't, right? Like they laid it out and they're saying, hey, don't use this bloodline.
Right.
It's just hanging up there on the wall. And if they don't use it, then it's an unused story thread, which is fine. But it's better if they call it back and actually utilize it. Like, oh yeah, they're totally of Bavmorda's bloodline. Yeah.
So there's 3 different possible directions they can take this, to this question, I think, is the obvious one is Eric, because he was captured presumably for some purpose like that, which is, hey, we need your blood, or something about your bloodline. in order to assist our, evil purposes here. And then if Kit is trying to save Eric, she could offer herself in his place at some point, which means it could be her. And then obviously Alora, if she is in some way connected to Bavmorda or the crone because of the fact that her blood was taken for the ritual in the film, then it could also be her. So it could be any of the three of them ultimately who is turned in some way or at some point in order to empower the crone.
I think the Alora one is completely just as valid as the other two, just because Alora, we talked about this last episode, is probably connected with Bavmorda in some way, and thus the magic that is there. It's very suspicious that the crone, the withered crone, decided to get rid of Alora the exact same way as Bavmorda tried, banishing her to the 13th realm, right? The 13th night. Yeah, suspicious.
Yeah.
That's
suspicious.
Don't be suspicious.
For sure.
Sus. Yes.
Sus, as the kids say.
All right, let's move on to our next area. Let's talk about mythic inspirations, parallels, and major themes. This kind of will help us guide our conversation. I need to start out with one that's actually quite major, and I sort of just ignored it for a variety of reasons when we recorded the first 2 episodes, even though I knew about it beforehand, which is that there is a direct pull from Cthulhu mythos, specifically by John Kasdan, as these scripts are being written. He specifically tweeted out on December 4th, Willow Tidbit series is packed with Cthulhu mythos Easter eggs. Hastur, Nakonic, Derverimus, mysterious, just in the first episode. But a warning, investigate further at your peril, at your own sanity. These doorways and passages lead to ancient places. Okay, fine, John. I guess I'll talk about it. You must. Okay. Why do I struggle with this? I'm going to get a little bit personal and say, with the most part, when I think about Jungian archetypes and my own shadows, because I investigate this stuff so much within the context of fiction and within my own life, there are very few shadows I haven't named, become friends with, and eaten. They're now my shadows. I own them and I have the power over them. There is just something about the existential dread that exists in Cthulhu mythos that I have not consumed. There's something so otherly, so otherworldly. And the big thing about it is that the mythos is based on that the shadows that go bump in the night are not from yourself or some sort of projection of yourself. They are scary other things, alien even to human psychology. They are not devils or archetypes that you can name because they've never existed within our world. They're alien. They're from some other place and cannot be called to and recognizable in our traditional sense of the word. And, I really struggled with this. Like, I had an existential crisis about covering Willow because that concept that you can never truly experience the journey home from the darkness is core to Lovecraft and all of the people that have written within the world, right? The horror is that you never get to come home again. You're lost in the darkness forever. You go mad and eventually you die, right? Or you get consumed by the other, right?
Right.
I think it's really important to point out that Willow and anything anything from George Lucas does not align to that. There is always a journey home. There's always growth and transformation and apotheosis, which is the realization of your interconnectivity with the with the whole world, including the shadows and the things that go bump in the night. And I really struggled to make sense of these two things unless John is using the language of Cthulhu mythos and the psychology of it to say you should be afraid of your subconscious. You should be afraid of the things in the language of the night that speak to you from the shadows. And when you look at them, you shouldn't know them and you should actually be afraid of them. But in the end, when you come back from the unknown, from the underworld, the world is still the world, you know? And I think that's how he's using it. So he's using it in a way to produce cool monsters, cool words, and to actually be quite scary. Did that make sense, Missy?
Yeah. I think it did make a lot of sense. I mean, I definitely, so I knew nothing about Cthulhu mythos, you know, when I saw that comment from John. I know, well, I get the basics, right? I did a little Wikipedia entry, right? You know, like I looked it up briefly. I didn't go into any kind of depth. I haven't read any Lovecraft. I don't, you know, I watched Lovecraft Country. That's the extent of my interaction with Lovecraft. So that's it. But at a high level, what I understand to be is this: in a fairy tale, all knowledge is self-knowledge, and all knowledge contributes to wholeness. And in Lovecraft or in Cthulhu,
is corrupting.
All knowledge
and corrupting
leads to madness. Yes. So it makes it difficult, to your point, to have any kind of internal journey because, you know, and this is why it's interesting, right? Because the next thing we're going to talk about is the consumption theme, and you like eat yourself, basically.
Yeah. So in sort of mythos like this, from a Jungian perspective, the characters never leave the child phase, right? They never grow up. They never experience that transformation. They are only stuck in the labyrinth of their own undoing, because with the horrors that surround them, they never actually look inward. So what we need to know is, will that happen here? And I think it's already happening. So it's not the same, right? I think that, but it does feel a bit like oil and water when you kind of compare them. That's where I have struggled and had like a lot of existential dread. Like, what is going on?
Well, what makes me nervous as far as this particular story is concerned is kind of what we were talking about last episode, which was we all have trust issues now with stories. We have significant trust issues with stories. We have trust issues with the fact that some creators have demonstrated that they do not understand the symbols that they are working with. And that concerns us. So, you know, as much as I know that John's super excited to use, you know, these Cthulhu references and everything, and is like, hey, check out the Easter eggs and everything, I get nervous and I go, all right, I hope you're being very deliberate about this, because I don't want these symbols to appear in a way where the intention was just, hey, check out this cool thing, and ultimately you ended up telling, you know, a story that is not Lucasian.
Yeah.
Because I want Lucas. I want Lucas in my Lucas
where's
film
the Lucas
story?
Put the Lucas back in Lucasfilm. Exactly. And like, what is important is, you know, the thesis, the antithesis, and then the synthesis, right? Like we need the synthesis. That is the key to this sort of storytelling. Do I think that all you need to include these concepts is to realize that the horror was in you the whole time. And then it's solved from a fairy tale, from a mythic structure perspective. But yeah, it did give me a bit of a panic attack thinking about it. I hate to admit that, but and I just want to shout out Shihaya Spring for talking to me and letting me talk at her about these the Cthulhu mythology, because it's been like 20 years since I've read much Lovecraft or any of the people that are famous for writing in the world. But there's more Cthulhu mythos throughout this episode even. And so I think it's just really important to call out, and I will call out when I find out that it's related to Cthulhu mythos. It's actually the first thing I check when there's a weird name now, because it invariably means that it is.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Consumption theme, tying into Cthulhu mythos quite well, because the whole fear is that something will destroy, something will come from below, something will consume you.
Yep.
It is everywhere in this episode as well, and has continued on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. It's all over the place. And I kind of love it, to be honest with you. I like that they're that deliberate about it, and that they put it in the text as much as they do. Like you've got characters talking about being swallowed, being eaten, then you've got more use of fire, in a consuming way. So, I mean, it's definitely very intentional.
I still don't know 100% what it means, other than the threat of the end consumption of what lies beneath, which I have thoughts on what the worm is. Probably time. Metaphorically.
Yeah.
And it could be straight up, like a literal worm that will eat everybody.
Sure, but and if it is, though, that doesn't mean it's not also metaphorical. But I think that the reference to bloodlines and, legacies, destiny, expectations, I think all of that indicates that, the consumption aspect is you will be consumed by, forces and a destiny that is beyond your control. It's sort of a lack of self-determination, really. So I feel like that seems to be a big theme in this so far, because, for better or for worse, everyone feels like they must go on whatever path they've been drawn onto, and that they don't have other options.
It's time is really one of the largest, like time is running out. We've already heard that a bit. And like what is so attractive about Elora Danan is that she escapes time. She can be reborn even if she dies. And there's something in that that is tied to the never-ending crawl and consumption that we all experience. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it continues, so thus we call it out. There's also a theme of pairs that are being pulled apart. The brothers, Jade and Kit, the twins, Hubert and Anne, the two-headed were-rat. It's all like pairs being separated in the story, and things being separated is a wound in this story and a consistent theme. Now let's go on to the part that made Missy freak out. Maiden fleeing into the dark forest.
Yes. Losing my mind a little bit. Yes. I love it. Yes. We saw this in the little preview they had like the day before the episode dropped, and like you had a screenshot, and we were all just like, oh my gosh, what? So we were very, very excited about this. But I think that it's important to understand, Maiden fleeing into a dark forest, there's no one listening to this who is not familiar with that. You've seen it, and you've seen it many, many, many times. It shows up again and again and again. Probably one of the most recognizable for most people is going to be Snow White, and we will reference that for sure. Obviously, once her stepmother says that she must be killed, the huntsman releases her, and she flees through the dark forest. Now, whether you think of the Disney version or not, in every possible version of the story, she is frightened. She feels that things are pursuing her. She's just finally come face to face with the fact that someone wants to kill her. And so she's terrified. And so she's fleeing into the dark forest, and she does eventually find refuge. But this journey through the dark forest is hugely important, and it appears in many other stories as well. The other one that you'll hear us talk about is going to be Vasilisa, Vasilisa the Wise, Vasilisa the Beautiful, whatever they call her. And she also sort of flees into the dark forest and then finds herself at Baba Yaga's hut. that's particularly interesting because whereas Snow White, came upon benevolent people in the forest, Vasilisa comes upon Baba Yaga, who says, if you don't please me, I will eat you. She threatens to eat her. So it's definitely very different. Now, in a way, she does also still find refuge there, but with a very threatening creature who challenges her and, gives her these trials and tasks. So that's very important. And another just aspect of this that we will talk about as we get further into it is, what is the dark forest? Well, yes. Ultimately, it is your subconscious. You'll notice that other forests have already appeared in this show. They were not shot or lit in the same way as this one.
Yeah.
This is hugely important. It was scary. It was deliberately, they blurred the edges. Yes, they blurred the edges. She stumbled. She's, it's dark. Everything is terrifying. And then when she comes upon the hut, the lighting changes. So I'm going to stop there. But the point is, this is what the framing is telling us, and all of the way that this sequence is executed is, this is entirely metaphorical. This is entirely subconscious. This is not necessarily something that is actually happening in reality to Elora. It is an internal journey that she's going on.
Yeah, and I have a great quote that I wanted to read out to everybody. It's from Sarah Maitland, who's a British fantasy writer, and she has done a lot of writing about writing, right? Which is also really important, I think, in science fiction and fantasy, when we're talking about these things, if the author is kind of looking back on their writing themselves. And she compares the transformational magic in fairy tales and going into the dark forest to everyday magic that caterpillars, when they turn into butterflies, something dreadful and frightening happens inside the chrysalis. We use the words cocoon now to mean a safe place of safety and escape. But in fact, the caterpillar, having constructed its own grave, does not develop smoothly. It grows wings onto its body first, but then disintegrates entirely, breaking down into organic slime, which then regenerates into a completely new form. It goes as a child into a dark place and is lost, and then emerges as a princess or proven hero. The forest is full of such magic, and in reality, as well as in stories. Yes.
I am obsessed with that quote. Yes. I told Marie Claire when she read me that quote, I said, I want to eat that quote. It's so good.
It's so good. And it ties into like our next major mythical thing that's happening, which is Elora continuing on her hidden goddess being revealed journey. And, we've already seen the orange butterfly once. We know we're going to see it again, but she is a butterfly, right? And we noticed in some of the screenshots between this week and last that her hair is going to go red. So I'm so excited about that.
Yes.
I actually officially found what the rune is. It's a backwards fire rune with a little dot. So, because it is, right? But because of course it is magic. Like we hear that in the story. Yep. She is magic. She is fire. She is light. She is these things. That's just really cool to actually see. But she doesn't believe it, right? And that's the thing that's standing in her way, not anything to do with training.
But she does by the end of the episode. That's why she has so much growth in this episode, and why this journey into the forest is so important to her, is because she does. Because at the end of the episode, she, when the one guard comes at her and she touches his face and she burns him. So she is fire. And that's when she says, I'm magic. Like she literally says that. I'm magic. Right, exactly. And so and so she knows, and I mean, she's not she knows she doesn't have facility with magic yet, which is why then she's immediately getting on Willow's case about, well, if you just would give me the wand. But she really kind of accepts it, who she is now. Now there's a lot of aspects to herself she doesn't know yet. And there's a lot of other aspects to herself she has to make her peace with, but for now, at least she is starting to realize who she is and what that means.
I don't even want to bring up what a lot of people on the internet probably think of her, but it is a genuine, glorious heroine's journey. Like, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. I'm excited. I'm very excited. And I just, she endeared, I just want to say she really endeared herself to me this episode. Like, I liked her before well enough, but this episode I just was like, and now I love her.
Now I protect. Yes. No, I love her so
exactly.
much. And all right, let's move on to Maiden and Mage. Let's talk about some archetypes. I think we know enough about Borman to call him a passive hero or a coward.
Yeah. And I know that sounds weird. I know that people might be listening to this go like, what? How could you say he's cowardly? Well, but he is, though, because he's hiding from the rest of them. He's lying. He's he's not really aiding in the quest in the way that he should be, because he's got his own agenda. So he is, at the moment, he is the passive shadow form of the hero archetype, which is a coward.
His focus is elsewhere. And I think that is just, it's very apparent that makes him not want to engage with the quest at hand. And he's on his own thing, which makes him a coward. He's not embracing the true journey for himself. Yeah. And our next guy we want to talk about is Graydon Haster, who is a maiden, like the other three Powerpuff Girls, but very specifically a damsel, because he's an incompetent one and he always needs rescuing, and he points out that he's no help to anyone.
Yep.
Except for inspiring Allura.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to talk about that? Which is very classically damsel as well, inspiring the true hero.
I talked about this a little bit, but at the end of the previous episode, she was able to successfully grow the berry bush. Now, I do want to mention, and we'll get into this later in the episode, she doesn't realize that she did that at this point in time. In fact, no one does, but Kit. Kit is literally the only one that knows in this episode that she successfully grew the berry bush. And that is really important for...
nuts.
I know, I love that.
Damn it, I was too hard on her.
Yeah, her reaction was great. But yeah, so it's interesting because that is relevant to everyone's development in this episode. But it's interesting because the question would be, well, what changed? Why was she unable to do it the entire way through the previous episode? And then all of a sudden, as she's being dragged away after screaming in frustration, why is she able to do it? What changed? And it is the faith that Graydon showed in her. And not even just faith that he showed in her. He challenged her at the same time. He basically was like, everyone else can see it. Why don't you? So that is what he can do, is he can inspire her. I also want to mention that when he's trying to rescue her and fails, he's trying to untie her and she's like, isn't anyone else available? And he doesn't succeed. She then unties herself. So again, she sort of is able to free herself because he tried first. So Graydon is a damsel. He's not a hero yet, but he is helping Allura on her journey.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Let's dig into this episode. We have talked a lot about stuff to pay attention to, but this episode was a lot. We start out with in the Battle of the Slaughtered Lambs, which was directed by Debs Peterson, written by Wendy Maricel, John Bickerstaff, and John Kasdan. And we start out with Thrax Boorman being the narrator of this important history, all about Chimeria. Thule and Tiberius, who are brothers, set on a path of conflict, both wanting to inherit the crown. Tiberius has different ideas of how you should invoke leadership. Thule was sick from a young age. They have a mother named Annabelle, who was a fae of the grove. So she has fae blood. She was a fae. And all right. What do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the origin of everything? Do you want to talk about what it means? Do you want to talk about this conflict? Where do you want to start? Because I have a lot to say.
I feel like you probably know more about it than I do. To be completely honest with you, I came out of this little historical bit going, okay, that's good background. I don't know where they're going with that.
Okay. Chimeria is actually from, oh, you guessed it, Cthulhu Mythos.
Of course it is.
It's one of the old lands that one of the writers who's writing in the Lovecraftian universe wrote about. And it's in the same world as Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian, also Cthulhu Mythos, if you didn't know. So it is a land that, an empire that ruled long time ago. Thule is also a Lovecraftian empire that happened a long time ago. Very similarly, Tiberius is, of course, just literally means of or near the Tiber River. What is Tiber? Rome. So I actually think that they're pulling on sort of the concept of Romulus and Remus for these twins, and pulling in that eventually the empire led to a downfall. It was as important as the Roman Empire. That's what they're saying. The twins, Romulus and Remus, they had a disagreement about where they should build the town, and Romulus ended up killing Remus, or he fell from a wall, depending on the telling.
Much like the brother who fell out of a tree, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Twins, brothers, lots of pairs.
This happens a lot.
Separation of these things. There's a lot of things going on where things are separated. Okay, so essentially all of this is just saying this was a really, really powerful, important place. And it's powerful and important, written multiple times. The Chimerian cuirass being a magical defensive thing because it's given by the mother to the sick child. The Lux Arcana is essentially light, Lux being the unit of measure for light, Arcana meaning magic, basically in a modern sense. Arcana is like and how Graydon has used it. I know lots about Arcana magic. It's a lightsaber. It's a lightsaber, or it's like a magical flashlight, which is a lightsaber. It is the light of magic in this world, right? That's the long and the short of it. It's just a really old place with a magical bloodline built into it. Because she is the last blood of Chimeria, she has this magical bloodline from the mortal side, in addition to whatever else she is.
Well, and one of the things that Borman says in this story when he's talking about the Lux Arcana is that it only goes to the worthy, right? And so this, and then the way that Borman treats it later, kind of, stealing it and sneaking out with it and everything, this is why it's not just a lightsaber in terms of, it's light and magical. It's also a lightsaber in terms of it is very similar to the way that the Legacy Saber is treated in the sequel trilogy.
Exactly.
So it's definitely going to...
It belongs to Allura. And
yes, it's going to become very important because clearly she's going to be the one that's worthy to use it. And it'll be very interesting to see what hands it passes through on its way to her and what kind of conflicts it creates. Yeah, because I think that Kit having that connection to it from a story perspective, from her father's perspective, may very absolutely. And she still believes that Mad Mardigan is dead, and we don't know if he is or not. But I feel like what we're seeing happen is that she is sort of gradually transferring her feelings about her father to the cuirass, and that if she believes that the cuirass can be recovered, it will be in a way to her bringing her father back. So I believe that she's going to have an intense emotional attachment to the cuirass and to the Lux Arcana associated with it. Because it's hers because it's all she has of her father, sort of thing.
Exactly. I love what Borman says about the cuirass protecting against the darkness that swallows.
Yeah, well, exactly. There's the consumption against swallows. I loved it. I was just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Yay.
But we find out that Miss Muffin, as Kit calls her, Miss Muffin, as Kit calls her, has gone missing. And she has been, of course, kidnapped by Valentine. She didn't get very far, which is great. Like, I really like the upfront confrontation.
Yeah, I liked that too.
Jade finds him and her right away. And we instantly have this like emotional conflict for Jade,
it really helped because I do feel like, they haven't given Jade as much to do as I would have liked. She's sort of just been kind of the recipient of Kit's emotions, and it's been nice to kind of see her have her own challenges and her own conflicts. So especially I think her interaction with Valentine, it was nice to see because you haven't seen him be in any way like himself or affectionate since he was turned. And so seeing him very clearly kind of react to her as, hey, and I don't want to kill you. Yeah. That's how you know he is still in there at the time. And it does make it so much more powerful and poignant later.
I think it's really important to call out that the ultimate threshold guardians are parents. And in this case, Valentine plays both Sorsha, the parent to Allura, and to Jade. And the key is that when you confront your parent and you're like, hey, parent, you need to let me go on my journey. And they're like, nah, I'm going to take you back home. I love how Willow's like, nah, we're going on this journey. And you didn't really ask her. She's trying to become a grown-up, but the same goes for Jade too, right? Like Jade is being told to kind of, shut up and let me do what I'm going to do. And Jade's like, no, I'm a grown-up, or I'm trying to be, right? Really, really excellent from a Mythic story perspective. Valentine playing the parental threshold guardian. Silas is the best character ever.
I
love him so much.
He's so fun. He's
so good.
He's great. But this fight scene is important because you get a few important things. And Kit, this is her first real fight. This is her first fight where she's facing a very serious threat. She's clearly not prepared for the brutality of it. And we see that immediately. She ends up on her back and, really in an unfortunate situation. Jade has to turn away from fighting Valentine in order to save Kit, which is going to lead to their conversation later. But it's really important because what we see over the course of this episode is all of Kit's illusions about herself are getting torn down. She, discovered she was wrong about Allura because she sees the berry bush. She discovers she was wrong about her own fighting skills, which she was very proud of and very boastful of in previous episodes. She just discovers really that everything she believed about herself is not true. And it really is kind of just wrecking her self-esteem completely.
Ego death is a bitch.
Yeah.
Because really, it's all of these senses of identity that Kit has built up that made her so overly confident and so sure of herself. And in some ways so selfish because she felt like she always knew what was right, that are being torn away.
Oh, yeah. Everything. It's great. It's rough for her. It's a rough episode for her overall. But that's really important. And then the other thing I think that we need to note is that everyone in some way in this fight sequence fails. Yeah. And they all fail in some way. And then at the end of the episode, it's hard to say they succeed because it's not always success, but they definitely show some development. They have learned something. They've progressed from their failure that they had at the beginning of the episode.
Greatest teacher failure is...
Exactly.
It's Yoda up this place.
Yeah, so there's a battle at the beginning of the episode and there's a battle at the end of the episode, and you can see based on their behaviors in each one, and even in the blocking, to the extent that you can see it in the darkness, you can really see what they've learned from their experience in that final battle.
I know we already talked about Graydon being forced to rescue Allura. Like, he's like, go and free her, Willow is to him. And are you sure I'm qualified for something like this? He's a damsel, of course, right? And then he shows up and he's trying to untie her and, I'm rescuing you. And it's like, was nobody else available? Okay, this is important. Why is this important? Not because of the failure. The failure is important, of course. And of course that she eventually ends up rescuing herself. But they are actually linked from a responsibility perspective because Willow sent Graydon on a quest to her. And
you go free her.
There is a rope between them.
Yes.
As we have pointed out in our Willow movie episode, braids, ropes, these are the ties between characters.
I love that so much. And it's so brief, this moment, but it's so huge and so important. You can tell how much is going to be based off of it. I also want to mention that, and this might require a tiny bit of background for anyone who maybe hasn't heard some of our other episodes, but this is Allura's moment of dismemberment. This is, her hands being tied. She cannot use them. This is her moment of, because again, remember, she doesn't know that she grew the berry bush. So she's currently not really, like the power is there, but she's not conscious of it yet. And so now that she's being tied up and taken away and whatever, her power has kind of been forcibly removed or forcibly suppressed from without. Not her fault. It's forces without her that are trying to prevent her. And so it's a psychic dismemberment. It is, she cannot progress. She can't achieve what she needs to because her hands are quite literally tied. And so this is really, really important because when she frees herself later, that is when, what's the first thing she encounters after she frees herself is, again, this mystical experience in the dark forest where she finally comes to the realization of her power and that she is Allura Dan and she is magical and she fully understands what she can do. Yes. So I just wanted to call out that that's the other thing that the tied hands do. So there's just so much happening in these few seconds.
They really packed it in. And I don't know that everybody could catch that. Like, it takes multiple watchings for us. I've watched this episode 4 times.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I watched it 2.5 and I'm still like, there's so much here.
Yeah. But Graydon himself is even like calling attention to the fact that he's a damsel. It's like, I blew it whenever there's an opportunity to be heroic or even competent, I freeze up. He is stuck in this damsel phase. My father calls me an embarrassment to the name of Hastur. It wasn't a particularly illustrious name to start with. That's great.
That's important too.
You have to also he recognizes that he's not the hero.
Yeah,
yet.
It's huge. It's important, and I really appreciate that you said that he's stuck there because this was another thing I noticed throughout the entire episode. A lot of those visual motifs of being stuck, literally. The wagon gets stuck in the mud and they're all these characters that are stuck are trying to pull this wagon out of the mud. And then even
the wheel comes off.
Yeah, the wheel comes off. And then even Kit and Borman, when they kind of strike off on their own, their horses are reluctant.
Yeah.
They can't get the horses to move and to come with them. So everyone is stuck. They're really struggling to move forward.
Yeah. And this is like quite common. And it's the universe giving them like barriers to succeed. Yeah. They come across the hill and are derailed by the crone and the swirling vortex, speaking Nakotic. The stars align. The door is open. The sphere turns. A god is awoken. Extinguish the flames, snuff out the light, and exile the child to the 13th night. Okay, crone. Fine. This is good. This is really good. And I do like the follow-up, which is Willow saying, "Oh, you speak cursed Nakotic. calling him out. Oh, Willow knows what's going on with this
I like that
guy.
it comes from two places. It comes from hey, dude, why do you know all this dark stuff? And it also comes from hey, wait a minute. Why am I not the most knowledgeable person about magic here? He's genuinely jealous.
Yeah. He has a couple of those moments of being like, wait, am I High Aldwin? Like, what do you, like a couple of those. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
this stars align. So that's a specific time. The door is open. That is, of course, to wherever this thing is. The sphere turns. That's probably the earth turning. The god is awoken. So it's pointing to a specific time and event where this god, this deep, dark, chthonic, ancient one, will be awoken. Extinguish the flame. That's Allura. Snuff out the light. That's Allura. Exile the child to the 13th night. It's a nice little couplet. It rhymes.
It works.
Who knew that the crone's part-time hobby was poetry.
I know. And there's so many things happening here. It makes me so happy. So for instance, the stars align, the door is open. Well, what did we see? In the very first shots of the entire show was Willow's vision that occurred after the defeat of Bab Morda. I remember I said, hey, that looks a little bit like planetary alignment. Well, maybe not planetary, but definitely celestial.
Yeah, you did say that on the door.
Yeah, on a door. Exactly. So we know these are recurring motifs. It's clearly very important. Celestial alignment and timing is going to be huge going forward. Then you have exiling the child to the 13th night. I was super excited when they said this because I know you and I had talked about, wait a minute, there were 13 realms in the original mythology. Right. And then they said 9 realms. But I think, and this is important, I think that what we're seeing here is the 9 realms are the realms of light.
Yes. There are 3 that are dark. There's death, despair, and the demon race.
Right. And then the 13th is like the nether world, which is, just kind of that nowhere, if you will. The world between worlds.
The world between worlds.
But the point is, it is the world between worlds. So I was very excited to see that because it shows that they have retained elements of the original mythology. And so that was very exciting.
And we were worried about it.
And it works really well.
Worried about it. I don't know why we were worried, but we were worried.
I don't know.
Graydon's like, wait, they're going to kill her, aren't they? Oh, my poor baby Graydon.
Oh, he's so worried. Poor thing.
And Willow's like, no, worse. They'll banish her for eternity because she could be reborn otherwise. Oh, so she's a resurrecting god.
Yeah.
Oh.
Love it.
Cool. That's so cool.
Deathless
god, which also, the things that we've learned, she is the world. She is all of the magic in the world. And also, she can never truly die. She will be reborn, kind of like, I don't know, any sort of god out there. Wow, cool. I love reincarnation.
I know.
It's great.
Happy.
And then they ask what the cloud is. This noxious twilight veil, a swirling vortex of rage and madness that there is no escape from.
That's very Cthulhu, isn't it?
It is. It's super Cthulhu.
Yeah.
It's actually the cloud that you see is sort of a swirling version of a cloud shelf, which commonly accompanies sort of large thunderstorms. It can, but so far we've actually had sort of 2 wind, sort of air related things, the gales. So like winds and clouds and this like noxious twilight veil, which is clouds and storms, right?
What I want to associate that back to is, also that discussion of the stars aligning. Later, Hubert says to Allura something about her being celestial. And so I started to notice there's so many sky associated things here. Then you also have Willow is a farmer. Allura creates food, which is of the earth.
Yeah.
And then you have in this episode, again, characters going into the earth, characters getting stuck in the mud, characters being deep in a forest. So what you have is this duality of earth and sky.
Yeah.
Earth and sky. And
her 3 names. Me.
Yes.
like sky things. Like Brunhild was a Valkyrie, and Dove is a bird, and Allura is light in the sky.
Right. And when you see that earth and sky relationship, and especially when they call in the star element of that, this is where I start to go, is there some Stargirl going on here?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because, that journey from earth to sky is another huge part of Hidden Goddess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Because you are born of the earth, you are humble beginnings, you are uncovered,
and you ascend.
And then you ascend to the heavens. Yeah. Interesting stuff. Yeah. All right. Allura has escaped from her captors, goes into the woods. We've already talked very deeply about these woods. There is like a theme in this where she's being hunted. They're like right behind her. It is very, very snow white. And unbeknownst to her, and she didn't realize this before she realized who she was, and this is part of the identity reveal of the forest, is that Allura Dannon has been hunted her whole life, and now she is just experiencing that. She goes through the dark forest, which we've already talked about, and she arrives in this cottage and sort of open meadow.
Yeah, well, it's almost like this sort of
idyllic.
Because it's shining gold and it's so bright, and the way it's even filmed, it's when you're looking toward Allura, you can see the dark forest behind her, and then when you're looking from Allura's perspective, you see this golden light emerging out of the darkness. And suddenly you hear like bird noises and everything. It just really does feel like she passed into another world, which of course she did. That's what's happening here.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about Hubert. This scene has created a lot of conversation online. People are like, "Oh, these people are evil. Oh, these people are good." And it just sort of created a lot of controversy because I don't know that people were expecting them to be dressed anachronistically. Of course, jeans. But her axe. So Hubert's axe in general, a double-headed axe, is associated with a goddess. It's actually from Minos, the origin of the double-headed axe, and it was only associated with goddess figures from Minos. Isn't that interesting?
That's very cool.
When it started out, right? And then it traveled. But the axe itself looks ancient and old. In controversion, like in parallel with her sort of more modern-esque outfit. I personally think that these characters, Anne and Hubert, are heralds of the threshold. So they tell our heroine all of the challenges that face them. They announce the coming change. What is going to happen, Allura?
Yep.
And they also serve as sort of motivation to continue on. I know you have so many thoughts on this. So
I do.
I'll let you go.
So I'll start with, I didn't see it that way, but I also don't think you're wrong. I think that all makes a lot of sense to me. And what I think is so fascinating about these characters and this whole sequence is the fact that they can be, in fact, all of these things.
Yes.
So if you have a theory about who they are and what they represent,
are they the crone?
You are probably right.
Are they the crone interfering and delaying her in the wood, right? So that Ballantyne could catch up with her. It struck me off guard that her axe is named Rorgoth, which sounded like Morgoth to me. I'm like, oh, that's evil sounding, but they could also just be friendly helper people in the woods too. That are giving her the things that she needs.
And that's the key to me here is that, to me, it doesn't actually matter whether they are from a malevolent source or not, because ultimately the outcome is the same, which is they help Allura on to understanding of who she is, what her place is in all of this, and what she needs to do next. So it is really hugely important. A couple things I want to specifically point out is that a lot of what they tell her are things that she knows on some level. So they are helping to bring this deep knowledge to the fore so that she can accept it and realize it, completely. Because she even says when she's
rebuilding her ego and her perspective of who she is and her identity inside of the cocoon of the dark forest.
Because when Willow tells her she's Allura and she's like, oh, okay. And she just kind of trusts him and goes with it and tries her best and everything. But you can tell she doesn't really feel it on a deeper level. And specifically because at that point, she hasn't been separated from Willow yet and tested. So the minute she's away from Willow, then she starts to immediately question, well, am I really? Maybe I'm not. And you hear that in the way that she tells her story to these women. It's like, well, I don't know. Am I? Maybe I'm not. Maybe Kit's right. And so that's really important. The other thing too is they offer her their food. And our understanding is she actually does, in fact, eat of their food. This is important. This is the eating the food of the underworld. She is taking something of them into herself. Now it is part of her. So whatever knowledge she gained in this interaction is now part of her. She's integrated it into her. So that's hugely important. And it's a mushroom. A mushroom is sort of born of death. So it's sort of like her beginning to accept her place in the life-death life cycle, the fact that death is part of what she will achieve in her role as the goddess will be. Death is part of that. Yeah. And sometimes things will die.
And that's proven by the deaths of Hubert and Anne in front of her. And I still think that effectively from like a Joseph Campbell perspective, a good or a bad character encountered in such a way that reveals the truth of your journey to you is always a herald, right? And but these ones are so tricksy. It's just such a unique way to display it. Typically it's a woodsman. We get woods women. It's absolutely a unique way to do it. And I love that Hubert, when, sort of approached by Ballantine and, she's like, I'm going to protect Allura, this all plays into, there are going to be people that are going to sacrifice themselves for you, Allura, going forward. This is part of the dark truth, that death aspect that you mentioned. Violence is never our preferred path, but we sometimes got to do it.
Right. Well, and there's a couple other things I want to make sure that we call out here. So first, I want to talk what you said about Hubert and the woodsman sort of archetype that appears in a lot of these stories and everything. Based on all the evidence, I wouldn't be surprised if Hubert was written as a man and simply cast as a woman. That comes a lot, across a lot, because Hubert is only used as a masculine name historically. Also, I love the meaning. Hubert means mind bright. And so from my perspective, this means
enlightening.
Yes, enlightening. They are going to, illuminate Allura's mind and clarify to her, again, her purpose, her role. This is all really, really important. So that gets me very excited. Another thing is, even though they tell her, oh, people might die for you, we are willing to die for you. I also want to point out, this is the first of several times that Allura successfully prophesies without realizing she's doing it in the episode. So the first time is when she's trying to get them to listen to her, and she says, they're coming and they might kill you. And then they do. Yeah. And then I'll point out the other times that it happens later, but that happens several more times. She keeps prophesying things, just saying something offhand, and then it immediately comes true right after she says it. So she doesn't realize she's doing it, but she keeps doing it.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's cool.
It is very cool.
And we do get the, repeat of the symbolism that you talked about with the mushroom, in that when they do die, Ballantine goes to her and says, this was you're responsible for this. All you have to do is submit, i.e. still acting as a threshold guardian. Yeah. Don't you dare go off on your journey, Allura. Go to the 13th night. Go to your bedroom, young lady. The equivalent for a goddess, right? Go and get locked and don't change, right? No, you have to transform.
That's very cool.
And at the same time as sort of this whole event is happening, the team splits up.
I want to talk about two things there.
Okay.
Because I think I loved it. So there were two things that I just laughed at hysterically. I loved it. The first one was Silas was talking about how like, no, we should go through the voluptuous veil. And then a few minutes later, when Kit has to reference the voluptuous veil, she calls it the veil of boobs. And I died because I was like, yeah, there's Kit and her one-track mind.
Yeah.
Like she hears the word voluptuous and is immediately like, yeah, boobs. And I love that. I thought that was hysterical.
The pitiless pass and the voluptuous veil. It's very like nursery rhyme-esque, like to have these, alliterative names. They split up. Borman's like, I'm going this way. I know this good inn called the Slaughtered Lamb. This is the fastest way. And Kit's like, I'm going with you. I want to hear more stories about my dad. He had dropped those hints heavily.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that was
like,
very
come
deliberate.
with me, Kit, you know. And Graydon's like, don't let anything happen to Mom.
Yes, and I love that. It makes me so happy because I'm like, he doesn't use her name. He just says my queen. So who is he talking about?
So yes, on surface, Kit, obviously, right? Like that's who is
sure.
there.
That's what he means.
In a Willow-esque fashion, sometimes characters say something and it is transformed over the course of the story. Borman is supposed to be going the fastest way to Elora Danan, who is his queen. Interesting. We love it. This is so Willow. It's just, it's unbelievably Willow if they end up.
Wait,
together.
did you mean?
Like,
I think you said Borman. You meant Graydon. That's okay. I know what you meant.
Sorry, Borman was going. Borman was going to on the fastest way, and Graydon said, "Don't let anything happen to my queen," who is on the fastest way to is Elora, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yes, and I love it. Makes me happy.
All right. We get the continuation of the Borman Kit story. It starts out, and every time that he starts out this story, I'm just like, Kit, shut up. Like, stop. I want to hear the mythological, historical history of this place. And you keep on being like, but what about my dad? I was frustrated with her this episode, but I understand.
Aww.
No, not like in a mad way, but more just like, I just want to hear more about the Thule guy. Thule impaled his little brother on a spike. That does not sound like a good
that was
thing.
Pretty intense. Yeah, that was. It's interesting because I'm very curious to see if they are going to create parallels with Kit and Eric. You know, if Eric is turned in some way prior to their being reunited, are we going to see some serious competition between them? I don't know.
I also found this line super funny. He talks about his how he was taller and how like Madmartigan was shorter, but in real life Val Kilmer is 5'8" and he is 5'7".
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And so
that's so funny.
Like how he refers to Val Kilmer's character, Madmartigan, is sort of like how he actually is. Like, because he's the funny man sidekick. Because he was the squire. He wasn't the knight. It's just, it's a really interesting way because at some point in the future, he tells Kit that later on in the episode, he says, oh, about a third of it was true. So this is one of those untrue things. And, so how much of it was true? We won't know yet. But yeah. I also want to make sure that we talk about the interaction between Willow and Silas. Yes.
Because
when they're that's next. Yeah. That's next. Yeah. But I like how focused Kit is on the Curious and on this and how it's all through this like very rose-colored glasses explanation by Borman. And it all boils down to, if he was back, things would be different because we would have the Curious and we would have defense again against the Crone. But again, we've talked about this in the first episode.
Yep.
You can't just defend. Okay. They get stuck in the mud. Stuck in the mud because everybody's stuck this episode. And Graydon is speculating on while pushing the wagon with Jade, that Willow moved the Nelwyns underground because, maybe the sorcerer lost his mojo. So my question for you, Missy, is this how Willow gets his groove back?
I don't know, because, and here, the reason I say I don't know is because, and this, what I thought was so weird, really, in context. Okay, we talked in our discussion of the movie about the fact that there did seem to be a cost to using magic. But we focused on the cost of using borrowed magic, which seemed to us to be more significant than using your own magic, which was always creative and not destructive. So here, and it's hard to tell because we've seen so little sort of real magic so far. It appears that there's a cost to all magic, and Willow even references at some point magic punishing, which I thought was very strange. The idea that he would, say that using magic punishes, I thought that was odd. But then the last thing I wanted
never seen
to
that
mention
with Finn Rizal or with Bev Morda.
No,
I think it's just the particular type of magic that Willow does, because it's not his own.
But that's the thing. It's not even just that it isn't his own. We've actually seen him do very, very little, again, quote unquote, real magic. He does anything he can to avoid doing magic. So he still relies a lot on what are effectively tricks.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, like the smoke bomb thing that he threw during the early battle, that was effectively just a trick, really. I don't think he actually used any real magic there. And so it's just, he's avoiding using magic even though he can. And he claims that
he has a limit
because it takes a toll on him. And I'm just trying to figure out if that's really the case.
I think it has to do with where he's at in his journey as a crone, as a hermit, that he hasn't come back, right? He's resisting the return to out of the underworld.
Yeah. And I know we keep talking about how Allura is going to be able to do all the things that he can't do, but that doesn't allow him the opportunity to become the mage. He does have to rediscover that power and he has to discover something new that he hasn't done before or hasn't used before, so that he can eventually sort of reach that stage of enlightenment now where the cycle continues.
But that's really important because students teach the mentor in these journeys how to get over their crone state. That's key. Yep. They drag them out from the underworld and bring them back on the path, and they rediscover their power. Yeah.
Willow is going to get his mojo back. The question is, does it happen after the events of this episode? No, I don't think so. I think he still has more he needs to learn and more he needs to go through. He's not there yet.
We get the continuation of those, of him like, I'm old, I'm decrepit, I don't have my groove. In that, remember the old days, Silas, when we were out on the farm and then I still had energy.
And then we dance all
night with Kaya, dance until dawn with Kaya. Oh man, Kaya, drink.
I know.
and my husband, Kyle, actually pointed out that the actress who played her was significantly older than Warwick Davis when they filmed the original. And so she's in her 70s now. There is no way that she could have come back, probably, and like made it natural.
But I hope they don't just leave it an open question. I hope they do tell us eventually what happened to the character, because and to Rannan, because that seems kind of huge.
Feels open.
Right? We'd want to know what happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So did you have any other thoughts on Silas? Silas and Willow being best buddies is like, I lived for it. This episode, it was so good.
Silas says to him, "You know what you've got to do." And I was like, "Oh, hello, Kylo." It's just, they're different contexts. They're not the same thing. But the idea that the knowledge is there just keeps recurring over and over and over again. These characters know on some fundamental level what it is that they have to do. They're just afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Kit and Boorman arriving at the slaughtered lamb destroyed inn. They enter into an underground tunnel. And they find the well. And wells are really interesting. Were-rats are really interesting.
Yes. There's so much cool symbolism in this whole sequence.
Especially around the conversation that they're having and that Boorman is lying to her. Like from a Western symbolism perspective, rats are lying, betraying, immoral, harbingers of doom.
Yeah, but they also pass by snakes down there, which is the consumption motif again, as well as the, sort of untrustworthiness. They're in a graveyard, so it's association with death. It's a descent. But yeah,
it is a underworld journey for Boorman specifically. He goes to the underworld. Yeah. And they're having conversations about, Elora, oddly.
Well, like that sequence, I thought he sounded like he was so distracted by, trying to lie to her as he was hiding the arcana that he, she's kind of talking about, I can't believe you dragged me down here and everything. He's like, oh yeah, like Elora, right?
Yeah.
And everything. And he doesn't realize, he can't see her, so he doesn't realize he hit a sore spot. And so then he starts talking about like, well, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, if she could actually do any magic, then that would be different. And meanwhile, Kit is sitting here miserable because, of course, she knows at this point that Elora can do magic. So she's just wrecked at this whole, she's having this crisis of identity because she was just wrong about so many things. And she really can't handle it.
Punishing her because of your dad leaving.
Yeah.
Like a psychologist. Like she's having a moment in her inner psyche here.
She really is. Of course, she's immediately thereafter confronted with the two-headed rats, the were-rats, which, I mean, I know everyone knows this, but we loved it from the second we heard in the preview him say were-rats, because we were like, oh, it's the ROUSs, the rodents of unusual size.
And we know they watched Princess Bride as like, one of the kind of movies to get the vibe from. And yeah, it has the same.
This is the second direct reference that I'm aware of. The first one being Death Cannot Stop True Love. Yeah, only delay it for a little while.
We get Valentine showing up and they see the horses from Kit and Boorman and they're like, why are there horses here? Is this a trap? It's like, no, why would they just leave? Never mind. Like unfortunately, it starts to like be super dark at this point, and I totally understand if people were like, I can't see anything, because I watched it on my iPad and on my TV. My TV was fine-ish, and my iPad, I couldn't see anything.
No, my TV was okay. If I tried to watch on any other device, it was very difficult to see. And even on my television, like I could see what was going on well enough, but I couldn't see detail, which annoyed me when I wanted to see like facial expressions and stuff. That was not happening. So very disappointing. Please, everyone, bless you. We love you, but learn how to light these scenes. We know it's possible. We've seen it done.
Yeah. But Valentine's like, we're heading to the gateway. We're going home. And Laura's like, you're going to die. Look at you. You're literally
the second time she prophesies their deaths.
Exactly.
She prophesies correctly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then she burns them by touching their faces, like rejecting them, and is like, I'm magic.
I love it. She's like, I'm magic. And it's funny because I love the way she talks, but at the same time, sometimes the way she draws out her vowels, it's really obvious that this is not her natural accent. And so it always makes me giggle a little bit when she like gets overly excited like that. And I'm like, oh, I love your really forced American accent.
One thing I missed was Willow having a sort of a vision of Elora. He has two visions. He sort of has the vision of her, and she's sort of bathed in white light and her eyes are white.
Oh, yeah.
And then
that's
he has a vision of
loved it.
A castle, which we find out later is Nockmaar. And so he knows where they're headed.
Yes.
And that's how they're able to catch up with them, because they know where they're going. So it makes it really easy. Everybody shows up at the same time through fairy tale journey magic.
So first, yes, they see the horses there, but that's important for Elora. And there is a brief close up on her face, even in the darkness, so you can understand what's happening. Because up to that point, she sort of has you know, after watching her two companions die in the forest, she has sort of meekly been going along with Valentine and the others. And she sees the horses, recognizes them, and without necessarily realizing exactly what has happened, is thinking, oh, they came for me. Right. They're here. And so she gives her the courage. Yeah. Yes, it gives her the courage to turn around and say, actually, no, I'm not going with you. And that's when they start this confrontation. So I love that again, this realization that she's not alone gives her the courage to stand up and to fight back. And then the next thing is she says, I am Elora Danan, and I will do a spell that will summon the forces of good to my aid. And on the one hand, on the surface, it's meant to be funny because she tries the same spell that she used to grow the bush, which we're assuming is probably not a combat spell. But it actually succeeds because she does summon the forces of good to her aid, because the next thing keeps sort of performing magic in a way without realizing she's doing it. So I love this. I love that she says this and it's drawn out as like this funny moment of, oh, haha, she's bluffing and she doesn't know what she's doing. But then it works because Graydon and Jade, Willow and Silas appear right after. And Graydon has his amazing line, stay away from her, silly ninnies. So
silly ninnies, damsel.
Such a baby. Yes, I know. He's such a baby. It's hilarious.
The Eternal One will cleanse the world of all disease and pain. Oh, sure.
Yeah, right, whatever. Also, Jade threw a rock at Valentine's face. It creates a gash that's peeling back his mask or skin, you know, that he has that is the corrupted part of him taken over by the crone, and sort of, in a way, revealing that the true Valentine is still there underneath.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Sad.
The Kit and Gorman are surrounded by were-rats and end up, after Borman grabs the Lux Arcana, end up having to flee from the well into depths unknown. The fight continues. Elora is sort of rescued by Graydon awkwardly. Very awkwardly, and they go to Willow, and Willow's like, well, if we could all just stop fighting, I've got some Cemarillion wax in the wagon. And it's like the universe is saying, no, Willow, you're not. Do magic.
Yep.
Yeah. Graydon tries to save Silas. Silas returns the favor. That ends up hurting Silas mortally. I really appreciated this because although Graydon is so incompetent, he actually did manage to stab the guy attacking Silas.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm saying about how, like, all the things that they failed at in the first battle, they do have a measure of success in the battle at the end. And, you know, so just to back up a little bit, because I want to make sure we give the full attention to what happened with Silas before we get there. But when Graydon saves Elora, she says, I won't let anyone else die because of me. Yes, she's showing what she's learned from her experience with the women in the forest and how they did die for her. But on the other hand, again, she's prophesying once more because Graydon is about to be injured, which will then be revealed at the end of the episode. And I think right now we're going to assume that in some way she's going to heal him, which is her not allowing someone else to die because of her. So I think that's another prophecy. I also like that in this scene, we get a brief moment. It only lasts for a few seconds, but I loved it. Jade and Kit battle couple. Moving in sync.
Or courtly lesbians to fighting together.
Yes! It was lovely.
Yes.
I was excited. It was brief, but it was great.
Silas drops. Willow freaks out. He uses his staff. And I described this as slapping the evil out of them with magic.
That's exactly what it looked like. I was thinking the same thing. That's exactly.
And he approaches Silas and is just like, I can save you. He crawls through the water. I can heal you.
I can fix you. I can fix
Silas
you.
Is like, no. We got so much catharsis in this episode for deaths. Like, it's wild.
Yeah.
Like, Silas, we got a lot. Like, he's like, just tell Libby that I love her and I died doing what I was meant to do, saving my best friend. Oh
my gosh. I loved it. It was just, like the deaths were sad, but they were given the space and and the respect that they need in the story. Characters who would logically be affected by them were affected by them. It was really important. I appreciated that they, they gave each of them their own moment so that you understand how this is going to impact these characters going forward. Their deaths are not going to be throwaways. They're going to, significantly influence the events from here on.
Exactly. And then Ballantyne is, having this really amazing moment with Jade, and, he really reaffirms her competence. Every road you've walked down has led you to this. The crone fears Alora Dannon, training you. You have to get her to the immemorial city. It's up to you now. Raising you has been the greatest honor. Oh my goodness. And okay, so
I got a little emotional.
There's so much important things that happen in this really small scene, which this actor acted the crap out of, because he's had to play evil and also good, right? Okay, so there's an important step in heroic journeys where you kill your parents.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And it's like the killing of the father, which is, from a Star Wars perspective, it reminded me a lot of the moment that Luke took off Vader's mask. It also reminded me a lot, just stepwise, Kylo killing Han Solo. Controversial, but important, because it's really, really important. When you meet your father on the road of trials, it is not your father. You must kill your father, because your father that you should be listening to is on the inside. There's a saying, if you meet Buddha on the road, kill Buddha, because it's not Buddha.
Yeah.
That's the idea, is that Jade needs to be the parent to herself going forward. She needs to be her own lead and counsel. And the only way you can do that is metaphorically killing your father. And in Willow, when things are metaphorical, they become literal.
Yeah, the journey from maiden to hero is one of gaining independence, because the state of maidenhood is dependence on parents or mentors. So yes, the only way mythically that you can progress from maiden to hero, where you are an independent hero, is to kill your parents. That's the only way it happens, because then you rely upon yourself. And what's fascinating about it is, as we mentioned before, it is cyclical. It's important to break away from other people and become your own person.
But you have to come back.
But then a lot of the other stages are then about coming back into community and what that means. And it starts slowly. It starts with, you progress on to mother or queen, where you only care about your own people. So you care about others, but only your people and only your children.
And then king is you care about the world and the community in the world.
The community, the world, the larger community, the kingdom.
And then crone, you only care about yourself.
Because you're dead.
Because you're dead. And then you care about everything, the universe, as mage. Yeah.
Yeah, mage, you care about everything. You understand how it's all related. Exactly. So what you saw here is an important step in Jade's progression from maiden to hero.
We see that Graydon is hurt and his scar is glowing. I don't think that he was actually necessarily attacked in the same way as the others were attacked to turn them into these kind of dark ghouls. I actually think that he was just touched by the bad magic, and it reactivated his old wound, because that's where he had a scar previously. And so again, he's bad magic, now I'm cursed. But it's his old wound that's opened up, basically.
And we didn't talk about what he said about that earlier, but specifically what he said was, bad magic is corrosive. It eats away at you until there's nothing left. And remember, he's extremely educated about dark magic and everything associated with it. So I think that's a good theory. I like it, that he has encountered this kind of dark magic in the past, maybe arrested its progress in some way. And now, like you said, it's come back. And that is basically just something psychologically, something resurfacing. A wound that has never really been fully healed is now resurfacing.
Yeah, I wrote down it's old emotional damage that's over his heart. The pain that he had endured had been covered
Yes.
up.
It's over his left.
Opened the wound,
Yep.
and this totally makes sense with what we heard will happen in episode 4, which is his real life brothers, Tony's real life brothers, are going to be present in episode 4. So we're going to get flashbacks of what happened when his brother fell out of a tree, or probably he did some dark magic and one of them died. They stumble up the hill because Alora's like, he's hurt. We've got to help him. We need shelter. I guess they could have gone back in with the were-rats, but no, that's not a good idea. So they continue and go up the steps, and they know where they are. It's Nockmaar, which is
I'm so excited.
Alora's birth home. This is where she was born, within the darkness, right? Within the absolute muck of the dark side, effectively, in Willow. She was born on the
I'm
Death
so
Star.
excited for next
episode. That's the equivalent. Yeah. In the darkest dungeon
exactly.
of the
That's exactly what
castle
happened.
of the
100%.
Country. Yeah.
Yep. Love it. I'm so excited. So excited. Next episode's going to be great. I can just feel it.
Any final thoughts, Misty?
I feel like we need to address the elephant in the room, which is that people have different feelings about the music that plays over the credits.
I'm actually very neutral about it, because I've seen like Lady Hawk, which is very much like this. Knight's Tale did.
Yep.
There's like this attempt to meld modern and other, and I know it could be super jarring if you're like not expecting it. It ends up getting better when you watch the episodes multiple times, because you're like, oh yeah, the music is coming. But when we're like in the moment, you don't know how much long is left in the episode. Suddenly you get Enter Sandman and you're like, wait a second.
Yeah. So I'll explain why I'm struggling with it. And I mean, obviously people are going to have different feelings about it, and that's totally okay. But for me personally, and I don't know if this is true for anyone else, but the framing device that they selected for this show is a storybook. So you open a book and you close a book, or you turn a page, whatever. But the point is, they did not start, like, you want to use Knight's Tale as an example. Knight's Tale opens with "We Will Rock You." They make it extremely clear what you're doing from the very beginning. You know exactly what you're getting into. So my issue is I wouldn't mind it at all if it ran only over the credits. It's the starting it a few seconds before the credits run that just yanks me right out of my immersion in the world, especially when something as dramatic as Graydon's hurt is happening. like I'm supposed to be concerned for this character. Safety.
Like, it's in the script that this happens. It's not like an after choice.
No, and that's the thing, is that like, and it feels like, and I think that, based on some conversations we've had, it sounds like that decision is made on the lyrical appropriateness to it, which is fine. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue that the lyrics are very appropriate to the situation. I'm totally fine with that. My issue is, for me at least, the actual style of it really, really yanks me out of the immersion. It really bugs me. And I feel like that's a problem in general that this show, for me at least, has been struggling with, although it is getting better over time. But they kind of want to have their cake and eat it too when it comes to style. We get this a lot with dialogue as well. The dialogue goes back and forth between like very and modern fantasy medieval and extremely modern. Yeah, extremely modern to the point of almost breaking the fourth wall sometimes. So it goes back and forth between them, and sometimes it's quite jarring. So we'll see what happens. I think they're starting to gain their footing a little more. And obviously, as a viewer, I'm just going to kind of adjust, because clearly these are the choices they've made and this is what they're doing, and that's fine. But yeah, I just wanted to at least mention it, since I know there's been some conversation about it online.
Yeah, I think it's going to be worth it to actually talk about the lyrics with regards to each episode at some point.
Sure.
Because last week's episode, that one is messing with me, because the original version of that song is so hypnotic. It's wild. The singer does this thing with the timbre in his voice that matches the rhythm, that it vibrates around the notes. It's wild. And of course, Enter Sandman. You know, it's about nightmares and dreams and being kind of...
I love this song. That's why it was so annoying, is I'm like, but I love this song. Why is it?
Yeah, and
So,
like
yeah.
having these like femme versions of them like redone is really cool, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can totally... You know, it has knocked me out. The first episode especially knocked me out. I was like, wait a sec. The second episode I thought worked better. This episode, I was already used to it. So I was okay. But yeah, no, I can totally see it as like something. So our two critiques, light your sets. And, you know, there is a way that you could have maybe done a classical version that blends into the song.
Exactly.
And then by the time it gets to the credits, it's like the full rock version. That's just a kind of a smoother way to do that.
Yeah, agreed.
A Knight's Tale actually does that with the dance scene and Golden Years. So it's totally possible to do.
Hey, Marie Claire, can we do a breakdown of A Knight's Tale sometime?
Yes.
Yes. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. All right, Missy, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
All right. Right now, you can find me on Tumblr at All Girls Are Princesses. If you see me on Twitter, no, you don't.
You're so funny. Occasionally you're on there. You're just retweeting and hiding.
Don't tell anyone.
Reminder to everybody to submit your comments and questions in the form in the liner notes of this episode. We love reading them. We love hearing from you. And we've been really, really enjoying including your feedback in the show. Awesome. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.